Okay, let's talk about part 2. How to choose a hat when you go into a hat shop. Alright. Mute that. Alright, basically, you're at a hat shop. You know what, I'm going to close the window today. No sirens, no horns. It's a little chilly in New York today. Alright. We talked already about things like getting your size, not going too tight, going bigger if you're in doubt. We talked about brim size, 1.5 inch being a tiny brim, 2 inch being a kind of a medium small brim or a medium brim, conservative, nice size brim, medium brim. This is something like a 2, except this 2 is really oversized. It's like a double X oversized 2 inch brim. It's a nice hat though. Then you've got 2.5 inch or like 2 3/8, which is a little bit smaller. That's your classic brims, like your Temples and your Whippets, your Sevilles and your Valencias and your Cyruses, and all those hats, your Stratoliners. They all fit into that 2 3/8 to 2.5 category. The Temple's 2 5/8 in the front, 2 3/8 on the side. It's an oval. It's what they call a dimensional brim, so you can turn it down too, like an Indiana Jones kind of weekender style, and it doesn't stick out too much. So we round it off. It's a little bigger than a half in the front, a little smaller than a half on the side, so it's a half, we call it. Basically, that's your brim sizes. You've also got your color scale. We talked about choosing a color that's complementary to your face, your eyes, your features, and all sorts of stuff that you wear. It's important. But choose a hat that looks good on you. On the face, if you look dynamite in the hat, or that hat is just dynamite itself and you look great in it, hey, those are two really good pluses you've got together. A fantastic hat that also looks fantastic on you. When you find that formula, buy 2 of them. That's what I say. Maybe even 3. If they have another color or something, get another color. Because finding something with all the specs that you want, the brim, the color, the bands, the edge, the price, the quality, the texture, is it soft, is it hard, is it crushable, is it not, is it American, is it European? There's no way you're going to find something that has all the specifications that you want. It's just impossible. We have to make some... Okay, I want a cognac colored Stetson with a 3-inch brim. And you get there, they don't have it. We have a cognac colored hat and a 3-inch brim in this other brand. It's really, really nice. You're going to love it. Bam, you should get it. you may never find all the specs. If you're finding most of the specs, you can change a band. Bands can be changed. It's not cheap, it's not quick, but you can do it. If that's not perfect, I say, keep the band, sweat in the hat a whole bunch, use it for a while. Eventually you're going to need to change this band because you perspire through it and this gets stained or bleached out or something salty. Then you cut it off and you change it to your desired custom band. You could get it wider if you want to go vintage, super wide bands. Just don't let that width go up into the pinch. It's got to be below the pinch. Otherwise there'll be a big gap there. But you can go wider, you could go thinner. Wider is going to cover sweat stains, so if you've already got a hat that's sweaty, you got to go the same width or wider. Otherwise you're going to have like, two different colors there. It's going to be sun faded, sweaty underneath it. So yeah, I definitely recommend going wide with bands. But we talked about all of these things. A couple of things that we didn't talk about were quality and price of a hat, and what's the difference between the different felts. So that's something that's also pretty important. There is kind of, I've talked about this before, but not in a very, very long time. There's kind of like a hierarchy. There's different types of felts and different qualities of hats, and they start at the bottom, I'm going to say, with wool felt hats that are made in China. The Chinese made stuff is equal to the paper straw Chinese hats that you find on the street also for $5-6. If it's made in China, there is one decent company called Dorfman Pacific, also known as Scala. They make a pretty respectable Chinese made hat. If you can afford like a $30 fedora, 40, 45, and you can afford a $200 Stetson, I can understand that. That's cool. And I say just don't go and buy a $200 hat that's made of imported and non-imported materials. That's basically Chinese crapola selling for $200 prices. That's a ripoff. I don't mind cheap hats. I actually love cheap guitars. Squiers are like my favorite Telecasters. I own two, and I've owned Telecasters up into the thousands of dollars, like custom ones and stuff. I got rid of everything except for two Squiers. That one's brand new, $150, or it was. This one about the same, and generally a real, Fender Telecaster is at least $800,000 or something like that. So cheap is not necessarily bad, but if you're getting cheap, make sure you're paying cheap. Don't get cheap quality and pay top prices. There are certain chain stores that do that stuff. They list their stuff as made from imported and non-imported materials, which means it could be made of imported, means made in China, basically. They can bring in felt that's absolute crap felt from China. It's like the stuff that kindergartners cut, and they make felt crafts out of. They use that and assemble it in America. It's made in USA. So things like that, you don't want to pay like $150, $200 because it's made in USA. You got to look at the if something says made of imported and non-imported, that's a little shifty to me. Now, Chinese stuff, I'm not going to say it's bad, but it's definitely at the lower end of the hierarchy. With, I'm going to say, the Chinese wool felt by Scala or Dorfman Pacific at the top of that chain. They're definitely respectable Asian-made hats, like there are respectable Asian-made guitars. My Dean is from, I think, Korea. The two Reverends are made in Korea, but they're finished here in the U.S. or set up in the U.S. American. We've got Indonesia, American, Indonesia. So Asian is not always bad. Just because something's cheap doesn't mean it stinks. You might love that hat and, take it with you everywhere. I'm going to say if that's what you can afford, look for that brand, Scala or Dorfman. They're great hats. They're not the same as buying, a more expensive hat like let's say a fur felt Stetson. Okay, now you're generally getting a leather sweatband, um, which you won't get in the Scala. You're getting fur felt instead of wool felt. You're getting assembled in the U.S. So there's you're getting what you pay for, but I think a cheap hat can definitely satisfy. The other route you can go is buying used. You could buy on eBay and thrift shops and find really cool things for 5, 10, 15 bucks that are like, hats you could probably resell for 50 or 100, 150. You could get a lot of those buys, especially if you're in the, small boondocks kind of towns. They have really cool thrift shops that people don't attack them for cool, trendy things. It's just thrift shops. So yeah, look around. Those are good. The problem is they're always small thrift shop hats. So if they're big, go for it. You could tighten it. If it's too small, I don't know if you should get it. All right, so back to the hierarchy. After that, you've got American-made wool felt hats, like our stingy pork pie, our wool felt pork pie, our wool derby from Kappa's Headwear. They're made in USA, made in New York. They're heavily stiffened because it's wool. It's not an expensive fur felt like rabbit or beaver or nutria or wild hair. It's wool, but it can be thick wool and heavily laminated with a big stiff kind of coating on it that gives it a strength. A derby or a little pork pie or a Hamburg for $110 made in US, I think it should be stiff. Those are hats that if they get rained on, you want that hard coating to give it, snap and protection and stuff. The cheap felt just doesn't bounce back if you leave it soft. Although I've seen some soft hats by Scala that are super cheap that are pretty darn resistant. They're a little bit less resistant to shrinkage, but they tend to also stretch out while they shrink, so people get some good longevity out of those cheap hats. Okay, after those, we're going to go to something called light felt, which is above regular wool. It's a wool that's rollable, crushable, and very soft. Light felt has a logo inside the crown. If you look inside the crown of the hat, it's on the roof on the inside. It's LITE, light felt. It says crushable, rollable, water repellent, made in the USA, and all that stuff. It's a kind of felt that's patented, and a lot of companies use it. Light felt is not the company. They're the company who makes the felt. It's like buying a pair of Nikes with Vibram soles or something like that. It's basically a felt making company, but you could get light felts from Kappa's Designs, from New York Hat Company, from Stetson, from Bailey. It goes on and on. Every brand has their light felt. It's a really good felt. It's a great feel. There's generally no leather on the inside. It doesn't have a reeded sweatband. There's no reed, so there's no leather. There's no wire, or like sometimes there's right in here a wire or a piece of nylon fishing line that gives it that resistance and that circular feel. Keeps it circular here. So they take the reed out. They take the whole leather sweatband out. They're soft. You can actually roll them like a champ. People think it's a magic trick when I roll them. Light felt hats, you can do this kind of thing where you down, punch out the crown in half, make a U, and you roll it into a little cone. They average around, let's say about $100. We saw some pretty nice ones, from little tiny small brims like the Blues to bigger brims like the Atlantic. We also have Outbacks. The Outback hat is light felt. Stetson makes some Outbacks. There's a whole slew of crushable light felts. They're very reliable. They're good hats to take in the rain when you don't want to mess up your $200 or $300, cool fur felt fedora. You get a cheap light felt. They're also good for restaurants because you could stick them in your, your pocket. You don't have to worry when the snow and the rain starts. Oh, my super vintage whatever hat is getting a raindrop on it. You just they're very hardy. You just wear them and wear them and wear them, and same things apply. You keep the brim up, hang it up away from heat, and you're fine. Light felt is a pretty respectable hat. I don't look at them as cheap or inferior in any way. I think they're very classy American-made hats with a lot of technology, and they're more reliable than certain fur felt hats that are twice their price or more. So reliability is a good thing. It's like a guitar. It could be really beautiful and have this and that feature, but if you go on the stage and it's not reliable and it's going out of tune, or the intonation is off, it's worthless. It's just like a museum piece. So you need something that's functional. Okay, let's go. After that, we're going to talk about fur felt. Fur felt is generally made out of rabbit. If it's North American, like a American hat or a Canadian hat, it could have rabbit and beaver. Some of the European hats are made of things like nutria and wild hair. Wild hair, nutria, those are things that are a little bit more European versions of beaver. Nutria looks like beaver fur. When you look at the sheared nutria and sheared beaver, it's the exact same color, like a taupe color. Same feel, they're velvety soft, and they have the same qualities and stuff. But beavers are indigenous to North America, not Europe, so sometimes they use other things. Basically, they're all good. Beaver is like, got a mystique around it because if you look at beaver fibers under a microscope, they're kind of like a barb shape. They have like this kind of barb, like a fishing hook, and they grab onto each other, the fibers. So if you take a bunch of beaver fuzz, just shave all the felt and like make a bunch of fuzz, and you put it together, they interlock when you look on the microscopic level, where other furs don't do that. They don't have the barbs, so they hold water. When you put water inside those, that barbed kind of thing, it just holds it better. They also have a lot of oil in it. Beaver is like an oily type of a fur. I don't know how much of the oil is transferred into the hat after all of that processing. There might not be a lot left, but I'm sure they work some kind of oils into the felt anyway, because you could tell they feel very, some of them, the beaver hats actually feel almost like lotion tissues or something. Maybe, I really don't know how they make felt, but I've seen some of the steps, the big copper cone they use and everything. We have one of those cones. But I noticed that beaver does work very well. It's expensive. It could go from $350 up to $1,000 for a beaver hat. Average, I'm going to say between $350 and $550 for something, at our shop. They can go up to $1,000, and some people will pay it. I'm going to say $600 for 100x beaver, something natural and beautiful. But if you're getting into, very expensive Western hats, that's almost like a collectible thing. So, it's worth it if it's worth it to you, if you pay more. Beware of custom hatters that make beaver hats that are very, very expensive. Beaver hat bodies are not that expensive. They don't cost us that much money. So if they're charging you $1,000 more, shop elsewhere. You can also find people making really nice beaver fedoras for half of that. To hand make a hat actually by hand is a lot of work, and it's hard to find anybody doing it for under, let's say, $650 or something. That's pretty rock bottom. If you're looking for something super, super quality. But when you get into beaver and custom beaver hats, they can be very expensive, but they can also be a little bit inflated. So I like going with brand names and shops, because you also know that there's some sort of return policy, and if you get a problem, they'll stand behind it. Anyway, after beaver, there's not much. But there are different types of fur felts. You have different types of textures, what they call finishes. You have something called velour, which is a velvet, thick velvet, which is very heavy. It's kind of like the Austrian and Tyrolean hats. You've seen them. They're very thick. A lot of times they're beaver, a lot of times they're blends or they're rabbit, but they feel like very heavy, very thick plush, and like almost like crushed velvet, like but times 1,000. Velour is a heavier thing. They have things that are thinner than velour, a little less plush, called a suede felt, similar to our suede finish is like the Imperial series from Biltmore, or our Metropolitan. It's a velvety texture without being overly velvety and pimped out. It doesn't look like really 70s and velvety like an actual velour can. So a suede felt is a little lower. Velour is higher. After that, there's something called peluche. It's also called peluche. That's a silky, kind of a very small hair. It's hairy, but not long hair like those pimp hats. It's a very short hair that goes in one direction. That's something like our untouchable hats or our McGill hats with the beaver finishes. There's a lot of silk. They're also called silk finish or soleil finishes, Soleil. Silk finishes and peluche are almost like a long hair beaver that you kind of put oil or something like a spray and you oiled and you got them going in the one direction. So they look very shiny and silky, like mink or something. And it's not as pimped out as what they call the longest stuff is grand beaver or long hair beaver. There is something called short hair beaver, medium hair, but the long hair beaver is like, what you see in Superfly and stuff. It's a long finish. They comb it out so it's furry, almost like fun fur, and it's not that long, but you can brush it in one direction and stuff. And Biltmore was famous for making them for a while. Celentino makes them, some good beavers. The shorter hair finishes are more popular now. Of course, they're a little bit more tasteful or they're up to date, where the longer grand beaver, long hair beaver finishes are a little bit more 70s looking. When the movie Superfly came out, everybody started wearing those. It was like a precursor to the Kangol hats. Kangol came out with something called a Furgora, which was like a downturned Angora hat, almost like a British Bobby would wear. I think LL Cool J used to wear those. It started like in the rap days when breakdancing and that stuff was first, kind of coming out, the Grandmaster Flash days. People were switching from those Superfly Beaver fedoras to these things called Kangols, which were much lighter. You could stick them in your pocket and you could, break dance in them and stuff. So it was a younger man's hat. It was kind of a lighter, more hip thing you could wear with your sneakers and your jeans, where a beaver was a little bit more old school. You sit in a Cadillac or a Lincoln with it and you look real correct in it and stuff. But Kangols were kind of like the first generation of those sort of hip-hop hats. After that, they sort of there was a resurgence of gangstery and pimp hats. There was an artist, Big Daddy Kane, who was famous for wearing Homburgs, and then Biggie Smalls, who wore some Homburgs and stuff. But yeah, in the early rap days, fedoras got very big. Madonna started wearing some hats, and some westerns, and westerns got big, and there were some, resurgences and stuff. But the beaver stuff is hard to find. Not every company makes it, and it's really heavy. It's wintry, but it's so bulletproof. You could get snow on it, rain on it. Nothing really hurts it, knocks it out of shape. It's fantastic felt usually. Beaver finishes tend to be very thick felt and high-end felt, so they don't use cheap stuff. Biltmore is a good company for that, and Celentino does it. Most of these things have to be special ordered because a lot of companies, a lot of stores don't really stock them anymore. McGill makes a little shorter hair beaver. That's nice. Other companies, Mazer does it. Stetson makes some short hair. Borsalino, everybody does it, but the long hair ones are getting a lot harder to find. They're kind of at the top end of the spectrum. The only thing above that are pure beaver hats that are made from beaver, like 100% beaver, and something called 100X beaver. 100X is from the beaver's chest, not the long, spiky, kind of spiky brown mink-like fur that the beaver has. They shear that off, and underneath is a sort of a, like on their chest, a very almost like goose down, a very soft, fine fur. So they use that stuff only for 100X beaver, and it's clear. Generally, they don't dye it. They can dye it, but it's a lot of times they're you can appreciate it more when it's clear, because the color is like this buff sort of like a light taupe color. It's a very natural taupe that occurs in nature, and it's beautiful by itself. So buying it undyed is really nice, and it's popular to get it in cowboy hats. And well, back in the old days, there was a lot of clear beaver hats. If you Google that, clear beaver, Stetson, clear beaver, this, that, it was a thing. Now, these days, you don't see it much. And when you do see it, clear beaver or 100X beaver is generally the most expensive. Like our the natural hat, or the natural stingy natural, I believe, short brim, big brim. We carry them about $600 to $675, and that's the top buttery, beautiful felt. It just feels like nothing else. It has to be made by somebody who knows what they're doing, a very good felter, and good felter. Yeah. Sounded funny when I said it. And it's beautiful. But it's soft. There's no stiffener in it, so you can't really steam shapes into it. There's no stiffener to react to that. What you can do is shape it just with your hands. You could just go and teardrop it or whatever, by just doing it. Because it's so soft, you don't really need any steam. But anyway, choosing a hat is not that difficult. It's gonna be a taste issue for everybody, There are some guidelines, of course. There's a window for everybody. There's a certain amount of brim we can all take, and there's a shortness that we could all get to. You can't really wear no brim at all. So there's like a bracket for everybody. There's not one brim that works for us. There's a whole bunch of them. If you have the ability to try on a 2, a 2.5, a 3-inch brim, whatever you want. See how they look. If you don't, go to a store and try to find any hats you can. Whatever hats, rain hats, ladies' hats. Measure the brim, see how it looks on you. Or look at the stuff I showed you today, just to get a better idea of what brim sizes are like, and do a little research, See what we can do here.